hope you're all here for the on-the-spot feedback session. That's what we're going to be talking about. We affectionately call it OTSF, so you might hear us refer to that, on-the-spot feedback. It deals with developing an important workforce communication skill, and we welcome you here, and I hope you've been enjoying the ARIS Summit. Ideally, I hope we'll be together in person next year. It's been a couple of strange years. You'll see on the screen the different organizations that this project relates to. We are an NSF project. It's led by the Astronomical Society of the Pacific, and it includes Oregon State University, the National Radio Astronomical Observatory, NRAO, and then the Portal to Public at the Institute for Learning Innovation. So those are the partners for the project. And we have representatives from all of them. So in the next slide, you'll see who will be presenting. And next slide, there you go. Thanks, Kari. We have one person who's arranging this. Greg Schultz is here from the Astronomical Society of the Pacific, Susie Gurton from NRAO, Alyssa Corin and myself, Dennis Schatz, are here from the Institute for Learning Innovation, and last but not least, Kari O'Connell from the STEM Research Center at Oregon State University. So our plan for today is to give you an overview of the project. It's in progress, or we don't have something absolutely final to share with you, but you'll get an understanding of the overall strategy and the set of feedback tactics that we have, plus the research that we're doing as part of the project. We'll delve more specifically into a number of the tactics and finally provide time for some questions at the end, and to try and get some input from you regarding how you think this program will work for you and whether it will have value. At this point, it'd be great if you leave your microphones off. You can have your videos on or off. It doesn't matter too much, but we'll be going into breakout rooms, and we'll certainly have some lively discussion there as well as at the end. So thank you. So what is the on-the-spot feedback project? Our goal, the next slide, is to give scientists tools to monitor what their audience think, feel, and understand during their outreach programming. So this is, lots of times it's people want to know, how am I doing? And they do a survey at the end. The goal for this project is to develop a strategy and tactics to use while you're presenting to improve what you're doing. And next slide. And typically, we get on our training at Portal to Public, we've trained a lot of scientists, and I know a lot of you have been involved with training scientists. It's how do I know whether they're with me? How do I know whether they understand me? How do I know their interests? How do I find out what they already know? So these are the kinds of questions we're trying to delve into specifically with the on-the-spot feedback tactics, and give scientists the skills to be able to do that during their outreach events. So next slide. So ultimately what you'll find is we'll be creating materials, videos, online resources, workshops to help scientists make immediate and longer term changes to their outreach events. With that introduction, I'm going to turn it over to Alyssa Corin from ILI to go into more details.
Thank you, Dennis. So first, we'd like a little bit of feedback from you all. I'd like you to think for a moment about how comfortable you are with gathering feedback from your audience about their knowledge and understanding, their interests, any relevant life experiences they may have related to the topic you're sharing. And how comfortable are you with using that feedback data to inform your presentation choices? So there are two parts here. You have to gather feedback, and then you have to use the feedback. So comment in the chat which ring you might fall into. Do you think you're sort of in the comfort zone with that, the growth zone, or the panic zone? And as you're thinking that through, and as you're adding to the chat, yeah, oh good, I see a lot of growth. Excellent. Thank you guys. Yeah, it looks like we're all in the growth zone. And honestly, I would put myself in the growth zone, and there are a lot of variables as to, who you're working with and what the topic is as to whether you are more or less comfortable with that. But when we're working with scientists, we like to point out that sometimes gathering and using feedback can feel very uncomfortable for presenters, especially presenters engaging in a new environment or with a new topic or a new audience, because we often have a very clear idea of how we want things to go in these interactions, right? And inviting audience feedback and committing to acting on that feedback to adjust what you are doing can really introduce an element of unpredictability to public engagement experiences. So this can feel uncomfortable for us. But I love to see that you guys are all in the growth zone and committed to learning more. So that bodes well for this presentation. So in this project, to help scientists and science communicators be more comfortable in this work, we realized that we had to break it down and create a model to help them do this. So our first step was to think about the different ways in which we might solicit information from audiences and the different tactics we might use. So next slide, please. All right, so let's think together about this for a minute. Please add to the chat a few ways in which you might solicit feedback from your audience. This could be an in-person interaction or a virtual interaction. So let's think, what have you tried before, or what have you seen other people do? Yeah, it's sort of an interesting question. It's very meta. So polls and voting, excellent. Breakout rooms with guidelines and questions, asking questions. Yep, the event style matters, whether discussion is built in versus just sort of a presentation, one-way communication versus two-way. Asking questions, I like that, leaving time for them to think of responses. That's important, that wait time. Games, I love it. Okay, excellent. Next slide, please. These are great. Mhm. So this is our model of the tactics that we've developed so far. Like Dennis said, this is an iterative design process for us. So this model is still under development. We're still testing it. So we would love your feedback on it once you hear a little bit more about it. And as you can see, there are a few moving parts here. There are 7 tactics and 2 foundational skills. So of the 7 tactics, questioning is a foundational tactic, and it's foundational because it's present in some form in all of the other tactics. And a couple of you mentioned in the chat, asking questions was a great way to solicit information, and we agree. And as you probably know, questioning can be a powerful tool for sparking curiosity and facilitating rich dialogue with and among public engagement participants. And questioning can fulfill many different roles in an engagement interaction. For example, we can use opening questions to capture interest, invite participation, and provoke curiosity. We can use exploration questions to encourage active play, experimentation, discovery, and thoughtfulness. And we can use meaning-making questions to facilitate reflection, aid in understanding, and inspire further exploration. So there are many ways to engage questioning into your presentation or activity. Then you can see there's 6 additional tactics listed in no particular order. And you did touch on some of these too in the brainstorming. So you can see we're not really reinventing the wheel here. And I'm just going to take a moment to talk through each of these in case you're not familiar with them. But modeling, when building models, learners manipulate a physical or a virtual model to demonstrate a phenomenon. They might build a model from provided materials to convey understanding, or they can move and manipulate elements of a model that you as the presenter provide them. With kinesthetic activities, learners move their bodies to represent a concept, and they can move or position a specific part of their body to convey their understanding, or they might change how they move through space. When accomplishing a task, audience members build something or demonstrate their ability to do something related to the engagement experience. Polling, this was mentioned by a few of you. Learners choose between given options to indicate an opinion, choose the best answer, or provide information about their experience or understanding. It's very popular. It's a great way to provide some quick feedback, But as you know, it's not open-ended. So the presenter controls the answer choices. So there are some limits with what you can do from it or what you can learn from it. With drawing, learners produce a drawing to reveal their thinking or their understanding. And you might give them a specific prompt to respond to, ask them to label parts of a system, or otherwise use drawing to convey their ideas. And we like to say that artistic skill is not required to convey ideas through drawing. And Susie's going to talk to us about this more later. And think, pair, share, another popular one you've probably seen before. Learners have a short amount of time to individually think about a topic, and then they discuss the topic with other audience members, and then often a few people in the audience might share their group's ideas with the entire group. So that was a quick rundown. We're going to go into a few of these in more depth later in the presentation, but I do want to point out that these can all be used to provide feedback at the start of an interaction with a new participant to gauge their current understanding or their interest, or it can be embedded within an interaction to provide feedback on the engagement experience itself. So there is a lot of flexibility here. And you can do all of these in an in-person or a virtual setting with small groups or large groups. The tactics remain the same, but the tools or resources you might use to support the tactic could be different. So for example, think about how you might run a poll in this environment over Zoom versus if you were, found yourself working in person with 300, third graders, for example. You can still run polls, but you might choose to do those in different ways. I also want to add, before we move on, in addition to the 7 tactics, we do have 2 foundational skills. Listening and observing are both foundational to the feedback process and are critical to the use of all the tactics. And we really want to highlight that. It's the use of listening and observing that really elevates your use of the tactics into the realm of providing actionable feedback. So next slide, please. All right, so a few additional considerations. So let's talk for a minute about engagement tactics and feedback tactics. So our list of tactics probably looked familiar to you. Of course, you've sat in a presentation where questions were asked or a poll was given, or maybe you were asked to do a small group activity, right? But I also bet that everyone on this call has engaged in that way, provided feedback to the presenter, only to see the presenter ignore that feedback or really only take a cursory look at the information that you provided. So these tactics are commonly used to engage an audience. That's what we mean by engagement tactics, and they do a good job at engaging an audience and keeping their attention. But in this project, we're really trying to support the people who go through our trainings in how to move beyond engagement. So how to use that feedback that you get from the tactics, on the spot, in the moment, to make the learning experience more effective and more tailored to the individuals in the room. So you really have to use the feedback you solicit from your audience. So now you might be thinking, now that you know a little bit about what we're talking about, what else do I need to know to use the on-the-spot feedback tactics effectively? So we as a group quickly realized that just having these tactics was insufficient. There are a number of things you need to consider, which we present as the on-the-spot feedback strategy. So I would like to introduce my excellent colleague, Susie Gurton. Susie is the Assistant Director for Education and Public Outreach at the National Radio Astronomy Observatory, and she's going to take it from here.
Okay, thank you. So let's take a look at the next slide. We had to take a step back, right? We started with this focus on all these different tactics, but how does that fit into the bigger picture? And the bigger picture is Outreach 101. You have to know about your audience. You have to know about your space. You have to set your goals. So let's start with knowing your audience and what kinds of questions might you ask to get to know your audience? What is it that you want to know about them? Put some suggestions in the chat. Things that might change how you present or what you present even. What do you need to know about your audience? So I always say know your audience, but what is it that you want to know? There you go, baseline knowledge. How much can they take in? Where do they live? their goals for the session, age. Okay, we've got some great ideas coming in there. All of those are really important factors to consider because often age and the size of the group are common things that that you want to know. But if you don't know what their baseline knowledge is, if you don't know what their prior experience is, and you don't know what their expectations are, then you don't know if you'll be meeting those or not, right? It's just your goals, and this is what I want to talk about, but what do they want to hear about? And so we're encouraging the participants to find out as much as they can about their audience, and some of the cultural things that you mentioned are also really important. One of the other things that in the next slide that can influence your decisions on how to move forward is to know your space. Is it going to be a virtual one like this? Is it going to be in a giant lecture hall and here you want to do all this hands-on stuff? Is it going to be, what is the nature of the event? Is it one where you're going to a festival and people are going to be moving along quickly, just small groups coming by and moving on, and you've only got them for 10 minutes? Or do you have a captive audience for an hour? So that's pretty fundamental information that you need to know about your space and just the nature of the event. One more, next slide. One more foundational thing that we take a step back before we even dive into the tactics is to think about their goals for the overall presentation, right? So for the whole interaction, what are your goals? There was a great session earlier in the conference yesterday that was about awe and wonder. And we're encouraging our scientists to think not just about the cognitive goals that they have set for their presentation, but also some of those affective ones, you know, to instill that sense of wonder. And being in astronomy, that's always one of my one of my top goals is, well, now it's that radio astronomers don't listen. And then the other one is a sense of wonder about the universe. So set your goals, and then what are you going to do during the engagement to accomplish those goals? So that's not just what information are you going to share, what your interaction is, what is just the engagement, but how can you infuse those engagements with these different tactics? So let's take a look at the next slide, because there's all this research that you're doing in advance about your audience, setting your goals, about this space, figuring out how you can use it. The next step in your planning is actually responding to all these answers that you've just gotten. You're adjusting your vocabulary based on some of the answers that you've gotten. You're customizing to meet their needs. And that was one of the biggest points of conversation during our workshops, is that it's not just about your needs and what the message that you want to convey, but it's also what is bringing them to this presentation and what are their needs. So customizing your presentation to meet their needs, it's not always all about you. So thinking about how all those answers are going to help you relate to this audience. One of the things that we find with some of the outreach scientists is that they sort of have a canned presentation that they give over and over again. And we want them to get out of that mode of, well, here's my slide deck, I'll do the same thing every time, but to really change up what they're doing based on that new information that they have, and how to help them figure out how they can relate to this particular next audience that they're going to be working with. The last 2 points on this slide that I wanted to bring up, someone brought up cultural norms earlier, and thinking about the norms of the lab that you work in or of your field. Your very presence as an outreach scientist may be a challenge to some of those norms. Certainly when I got started in astronomy a zillion years ago, it wasn't expected that I kind of shook people up by, it's like, wait, she knows about astrophysics? and it was not the norm of how people pictured an astronomer. Right. And so my very presence was a challenge to their expectations of what an astronomer was. And so you want to think about how that dominant perception, how you can use that, and how you may have to overcome that. So there's all sorts of variables that we're encouraging folks to consider in the overall creation of their presentation. And now on the next slide, we go back to where Alyssa left us, which is there's this iterative process. You gather all this information, and now within that overall structure, where are those key points where you can embed some of these tactics? Is it at the very beginning where you want to choose a tactic to find out, does this audience hold the common misconceptions or preconceived notions, or do they already have some great experience and they're beyond that? So I don't have to worry about that misconception. So choose your tactic, define the goal for that tactic, and then also think through how you're going to adjust. So in that example that I just gave, if in part of your opening remarks, you're finding out, you're using a tactic that will get some information about some commonly held ideas about your field. If you discover, oh, this group doesn't have any of those, those notions, well, then you can adjust, then you can get it in gear and keep moving. You don't have to take that step back and worry about overcoming that. So we want people to think through just how they're going to respond. And it's not as simple as a bunch of if-then statements, right? Because it might be that people are all over the place in your poll, and you might have a real mixed group with beginners and experts. And so you want to think through how you can bring those beginners up to speed without leaving the experts in the board zone waiting for everyone else to catch up. So there's quite a few variables that we want them to consider, and as they move along. So that's it for me. I want to pass it on now to Kari, and she can talk about some of the findings and the research that's been going on.
Thanks, Susie. I'm just going to give a super brief overview of the research part of the project. This does have both the programming and professional development and tool development aspect of the project, but there's also a pretty big research component. And those of us who are leading the research are all at Oregon State University. And I just want to acknowledge my colleagues there, Kelly Hoke, Martin Stork-Seek, and Heather Fisher. So as far as the research part of the project, there's two parts to the research. There's this, as I think Alyssa mentioned earlier, it is an iterative design, basically throughout the whole project. But we started with the design testing part of the project, where we actually had several scientists who are very experienced in outreach and were willing to kind of play in the sandbox with us as we pilot tested the very first initial development of the OTS strategy and tactics. And that was a very iterative part of the project. And we had both development of strategy and tactics and our research instruments during that part of the project. And now we're in the field testing phase, which is testing the strategy and tactics under more realistic conditions, so much more broader outreach as far as who can be involved. And we already had done a bunch of testing and development of our tactics and strategies. And both of these efforts are being informed by research, which is asking more kind of broad questions that that might be applicable to other kinds of projects, and also evaluation of both the professional development aspects and the tools and strategies. So our research questions, and I'm not going to necessarily read all of these, but our research questions really are focused on the scientists and how scientists are changing, and as they grapple and think about and work on their public engagement skills in a specific way. So we have a couple of questions about the scientists and how can they learn how to use OTS feedback and adjust their public engagement efforts. And our second question is about, are scientists willing and able to change their public engagement activities, like Susie was talking about, using the same presentation over and over again, which we know is efficient, and that's important too. But are the scientists willing and able to change some of that, and how they work with the public to include getting feedback and responding, and what kind of support they need to do so. And then we have another, frankly, much smaller part of the project, which is around our audience members finding events more enjoyable when they're when scientists are using these OTS on the spot strategies and tactics. And because I'm running out of my time, I'm just going to briefly gloss over the methods part of the project. If people have more questions, they are welcome to contact me or anyone in the project. But really briefly, we have both a pre and post survey for the scientists. And then we're also doing observations and interviews as the scientists are trying out the strategy and tactics. And then we have a self-report system for the scientists to report to us how what tactics they're using and their self-efficacy, things like that. I think Greg Schultz is up next. I'm going to pass it along to him, and he's working with the Astronomy Society Pacific. And Greg, I'm going to let you take it from here.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you, Kari. All right, so Alyssa talked earlier about questioning as kind of the foundational tactic for this project, and really just everyone, many people mentioned it in the chat earlier when they were first thinking of ways that you can get information from your audience. You ask them a question. What we are, of course, wanting to have scientists avoid the trap is just asking rhetorical questions that they just get the answers that they really don't listen to and act on. So what we're trying to find are ways that they use this as a feedback tactic, not just as a way to, engage people, but so going beyond engagement. So actually, I realize this is the very first word here in the first bullet. It should be questioning. Questioning is an effective engagement tactic, as are all the feedback tactics. But we want to talk about how we ask the scientists to respond to that feedback they get. So Dennis had created the slide for a workshop we did earlier in the spring, and he thought maybe it'd be funny if we called this the OTS-ROTSF, meaning on-the-spot response to on-the-spot feedback. So we ask you to get the feedback, but the critical part is how you respond to using that feedback. So that's really what it is. Okay, next slide. All right, I'm going to delve into an example where this could be applied, and just a general example. I'm not a geographer or meteorologist here, but we're going to use this example. And I want you to actually chime in verbally. If you just want to unmute yourself, please feel free. It's not a huge group. I see about 15 or 16 of us who are not part of the presentation team. So I don't expect to get overwhelmed with verbal responses, but you can use the chat as well if that's your preferred approach. But first of all, what we ask our scientists to do, there's some preparation, as was described earlier, I think by Susie, saying that your preparation should be thinking about your audience. Susie was describing that, certainly. The setting is an important aspect of it as well. And then your engagement goals. You might have slightly different goals for the specific tactics, but your overall engagement. So let's take one example here. Imagine you're a meteorologist or an atmospheric scientist. Your audience in this case is going to be a group of middle school students, and the setting is at a science festival. They're coming around to different tables or exhibits, if you will, at a science festival. These interactions are obviously going to be much smaller in numbers in terms of at any one time. You may have one person you're speaking to, or a group of students, but this is a different interaction, public engagement than for instance, giving a talk. So we are trying to prepare our tactics, talk about using our tactics in a variety of public engagement settings, from one-on-one, what I sometimes call one-on-few, as might be the case here with this science festival, or one-on-many, where you're speaking to a whole group of people in a talk or at a science cafe or whatever. This particular scientist might have goals like this: better appreciation of meteorology and increasing the ability of the public to interpret satellite maps. So we ask people to really carefully think about their goals, because it does guide really what you want to get from your audience and how you will respond to it then. So let's throw out this question to this group of middle school students based on this image. What would these middle school students say if you ask them, what's the white stuff in this image? So I'm gonna ask you to be middle school students or people who are scientists, and you're thinking about this. What would you say they would guess as or describe as some of the white stuff in this image? What comes to your mind? Clouds? Clouds, tornadoes, waves, snow, water.
Any Californians in the group?
Smoke.
There you go.
Excellent. Yes, your audience will be responses will certainly vary depending on their familiarity with this terrain. I wouldn't answer. I wouldn't have wanted to get it wrong. So yes, there are people who will be shy and will be hesitant to answer. That does happen all the time in public engagement settings. They want to listen and observe. So you have to account for that as well. So I'm going to move on to the next slide, which is going to use the same image, river outflow. All right. The numbering, these should be bullets instead of the 3 number ones. I think it was a 1, 2, 3. The formatting got thrown off a little, but that's okay. Audience feedback to your question. It's not a sequence, actually. It's some students will say, oh, that's all clouds, because maybe they watch the weather with their mom and dad on the TV news. All right, and they're just usually focused in on the clouds in these images. Some may identify snow and what looks like mountains. And if you are familiar with the West Coast in California, that there's the Central Valley there and a diagonal, and there's a series of mountains, the Sierra Mountains, that does have snow-capped peaks here at this time of year that this image was taken. Some students may think of smoke coming from the ground, especially if they've been hearing about wildfires. They think maybe all of that stuff in the bottom half of the image is smoke. How will you respond based upon what you hear if this is your audience? So especially in a science festival setting, or maybe it's at a museum where you're seeing a flow of people and you only have them for a few minutes. They actually are more apt to be responsive to your questions. You can get all of these responses, okay? The really good scientist in public engagement is agile. They know how to respond to all of these things, all right? So anyone want to say, have a suggestion how you would respond if in scenario, the very first one above, say that everyone just focus on clouds and no one is thinking about anything else. What would be your response? Feel free to verbally again. Why did you say clouds? Yes, probe a little deeper. Yes, it's a good strategy. What clues make you think that? You should skip the second example as you're near the limited. Oh, see, that's message from Dennis. Yeah, I'm going to focus on this one example. And any other thoughts here? Oops. These are all good inputs. Okay. What differences do you see between the different white areas? So you could point to them to how there's a different appearance in the white stuff here. The snow there is actually smoke in this image. This is kind of a Southern California there, and I don't have the cursor control here to show, right? But you can see that there's stuff coming out, what appears to be from the ground over, and is flowing out towards the ocean, and that smoke. Most of the stuff in the very bottom part is clouds, however. But so anyhow, this is an example. I'm not trying to teach you all. I'm again, this is not my area of expertise. But yes, thank you for the. Thank you. That was creative use of the annotations that we wanted to use here. So you can describe a little bit around why the smoke and the clouds are a little bit different. You may have to prompt people a little bit to things that they weren't aware of, or if they are knowledgeable, you just move on. All right, let's go on to the next image. I know that I'm running short on time, and I'll just kind of wrap up here. There are other examples where you might have a couple of different images and you ask them similar questions, and you just need to be prepared for different types of responses. This one, the setting was a slightly different at a science cafe, so maybe it's a group of 30 adults. And so they might be a little more knowledgeable. You need to be prepared for that sort of thing. You can go to the next slide. Yeah, and so this is just a different question posed. You might ask them, what type of environment do these creatures live in? And again, you think about the part of the key thing that I want to get my message across here is we ask the scientists to think ahead about the potential responses. So that way they have additional slides or they know how they want to respond based upon those responses. They don't just expect one type of response. All right, I think that might be my last slide. And we will go to a breakout.
Yes. So in just a moment, I'm going to open 3 breakout rooms and you get to choose your own adventure. So we have a breakout room that's going to explore the drawing tactic in more depth, one that will explore accomplish a task, and one that will explore polling. So you have the ability to sort yourself into a breakout room that you're most interested in. If you're having trouble with that, send me a chat and I'll help you find the room you want to get into. Additionally, if you would like the closed captioner to follow you into your breakout room, please send a direct message to QTS Katina to let them know to follow you into your room. And with that, we'd like you to come back, let's say at 9 minutes to the hour, and I am going to open all the rooms now. Come back, everyone.
We have a few more minutes. I didn't remember what our last time is doing.
Welcome back. Yeah, if you could just go to the last slide. I hope everybody, we had a great conversation about accomplish a task. I hope the other conversations were as fruitful. What we'd like to do now is to really open this up. You can unmute. This is really a time, well, first of all, thank you for participating. Time for questions. We'd love to know how this might fit into the kinds of programs you do. Is it useful? What would make it more useful? And I think what we'll do is share the screen now so we can see everybody and open it up for any questions or comments. We'd especially like to know if something like this would fit into the kinds of things that you're doing. How could it be more appropriate? So any thoughts about that would be very appreciated.
Are there any tactics you felt we forgot on our list?
Do you have scientists that you'd like to be learning more of these sort of things? Do you want us to come to your place to do a workshop? There's varied questions here.
Oh, there's a great question in the chat. Are you aware of any really great examples of effective sessions that may be on YouTube or online to view? That's actually something we're hoping to create we're starting to talk about creating examples for scientists who maybe don't go through our training. But I don't know that we've found a great source of that yet. Though there are some good one-off examples. Susie, can you think of any ASP existing videos that might be helpful, or Greg?
I was actually going to mention the guide that you're putting so much work into, Alyssa, is that, ultimately we would love the guide to be linked to video resources, but right now we're starting with written examples, and there's a deeper dive into each one of the tactics, and there's lots of examples of the tactics being used. In there. Some of them are longer examples, some of them are just little short synopsis of how you might use it across the sciences. I have to say that the biggest challenge for me in this project is that we're trying to cover, do this in a way that any of the sciences that could, you could learn something about the tactic and make it relevant in your science. I'm used to doing a lot of astronomy outreach, and coming up with examples across all of the fields has been a real challenge. But I haven't seen we haven't found online great examples of this. And so Greg is working with a video company in San Francisco to actually come up with some videos about the tactics.
Yeah, the videos we'll have shortly, but they won't be a full sessions. They're just going to be kind of like 3 to 5 minute videos, kind of illustrating some reenacted scenes from the tactics in use.
Mm-hmm.
Is how the question in the chat, how are you rolling out training and selecting the participants? So far, we've been working with some of the portal to the public network groups and through the AAS, American Astronomical Society, Astronomical Astronomy Ambassadors. We do have some fall workshops that we're doing specifically in the North Carolina area, Boulder, Colorado, and one other one that I'm
Madison.
Madison, sorry, and University of Wisconsin. But we hope to be doing more after that. We do have an application process because we're getting, this is really a training that we think is kind of not science communication 101 for people that haven't done much. It's really for people that have done a little bit. So refining their ability by learning about this feedback tactics. If somebody would, thank you, Susie, for putting in the URL for how to keep up. It's a pretty fundamental website at this point. One of our goals, ultimately, back to the question about YouTube videos, is that you would go there, you'd be able to get access to the guide, you'd be able to see videos. We'd love to have, maybe 50, 60 examples where you could go and say, well, I'm an environmental scientist. I'd like to see those examples, or I want to do drawing, and I want a drawing example. So we ultimately hope to have that, but we still have a little bit of time to go on our grant. Just have a couple of minutes left. Any last questions? Comments? Well, we appreciate your joining us. We hope you will go on to the poster sessions, which are coming up right after this at 9 o'clock West Coast time. And then at 10 o'clock is one of the plenary sessions. So we'll look forward to seeing you there. Thanks for coming.